The ward went quiet before anyone screamed. Monitors kept blinking. 4 pumps kept clicking, but every head turned toward the doors as they burst open at the far end of the corridor. Shouting echoed from the stairwell. Boots, too many, too fast. An intern nurse stood at a medication cart, sleeves rolled up, checking labels with unhurried hands. No badge stripes, no authority. Someone shoved past her without apology. Down the hall, a man with blood on his knuckles pushed forward, eyes wild, voice carrying command. Even security stepped back. The intern nurse finally looked up. She watched him approach, measured his breathing, his balance, the way the room reacted to him, then she moved calmly. They thought she was just an intern. They were wrong. The hospital never slept, but it did slow down. At night, the building breathed differently. Lights dimmed just enough to soften the edges of the corridors. Footsteps echoed longer. Voices dropped without anyone asking them to. The machines carried more of the sound than the people did. She moved through it quietly, an intern nurse on her 3rd month, according to the badge clipped to her chest. White strip, temporary access, no authority beyond what the role demanded. She checked vitals in room 11, adjusted an 4% rate and wrote the numbers down without looking back at the monitor twice. Her handwriting was neat, small, consistent. She replaced the pen in her pocket the same way every time. Outside, the city was loud. Sirens bled through the sealed windows, distant but constant. Not emergency traffic, too many at once, too layered. Helicopter rotors passed overhead, slow and circling. The sound vibrated faintly through the glass. The charge nurse pretended not to notice. "Intern," she called softly, not unkindly. "Can you take 12 and 13? "Yes," she replied. No hesitation, no questions. She pushed the medication cart down the corridor, wheels aligned, hands resting lightly on the handle. She did not rush, even when a security officer jogged past her in the opposite direction, radio pressed tight to his mouth. "Main entrance locked," he muttered. Again, she registered it without reacting. Room 12's patient was awake, anxious, fingers plucking at the blanket. She lowered her voice instinctively, speaking slowly as she checked blood pressure. "You're safe," she said, not reassuring. "Just factual. Your numbers are fine." The patient nodded, breathing settling slightly. In the hallway, a television mounted near the nurse's station showed a muted news feed. Shaky footage, crowds, police lines bending under pressure. A caption crawled along the bottom of the screen. "Unrest continues near medical district." Someone turned the volume down further. She finished her rounds and returned the cart to its place. As she did, she noticed the way the corridor curved, how the supply closet door sat just out of direct camera view, how the crash cart was parked a few feet too far from the intersection. She moved it closer, not abruptly, just enough. No one commented. At the station, 2 nurses spoke in low voices. "They say one of the organizers got hurt," one whispered. "A leader. They won't bring him here," the other replied. "They wouldn't." They both looked uneasy. She stood close enough to hear, far enough to be ignored. She pretended to review a chart. Security radios crackled again. Short bursts, incomplete sentences. Crowd pushing north. Doors holding for now. Repeat, holding for now. She glanced at the clock. 1:17 a.m., night rotation always revealed people. Fatigue stripped away performance. What remained was habit. A junior doctor leaned against the wall, scrolling through his phone, eyes darting up every time a sound carried too far. An orderly stacked linens too quickly, corners uneven. Security officers clustered instead of spacing themselves. She saw all of it. She did nothing. When a patient alarm chimed in room 13, she responded before the primary nurse could. Adjusted a lead. Waited for the rhythm to settle. No urgency. Just presence. "Thanks," the nurse said, distracted. She nodded and stepped back into the corridor. A distant shout echoed from somewhere below. Not inside the hospital. Not yet. The sound made several people freeze. She kept walking. At the west end of the ward, she paused, near a window that overlooked the ambulance bay. 2 police vans were parked at angles that blocked civilian access. Their engines were off, but the drivers remained inside. Containment posture. She checked her watch again. The security door near the stairwell buzzed briefly, then fell silent. Someone tested it. Someone outside. She filed that away. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse answered a phone call and turned her back, voice tight. "Yes, I understand. No, we don't have confirmation. We're trying to keep the ward calm." The word calm carried weight. She approached quietly. "Do you want me to cover 16 as well?" she asked. The charge nurse looked up, relieved to focus on something manageable. "Yes, please." She took the chart and moved on. Room 16 housed an elderly man recovering from surgery. He slept lightly, stirring as she adjusted his blanket. "You're doing fine," she said softly, more to herself than him. From the corridor came a sudden rush of footsteps. Security again, faster this time. A stretcher clattered briefly, then stopped. Voices overlapped, tense, controlled but barely. She did not move toward the sound. She finished what she was doing first. That was the rule. When she stepped back into the hall, the noise had settled into murmurs. The charge nurse stood with 2 security officers now, nodding quickly, absorbing information she did not want. The junior doctor hovered nearby, useless. "They're saying the crowd's splitting," one officer said. "Some are pushing this way." "Toward the hospital?" the charge nurse asked. "Toward anything with doors." Silence followed. She spoke then. Not loudly. "Which entrances are still open?" They all turned toward her, surprised. The officer answered without thinking. "Service access and the west stairwell. Ambulance bays controlled." She nodded. "The west stairwell opens directly into the ward?" "Yes," he said. "But it's locked." "Locks delay," she replied. "They don't stop." The charge nurse frowned. "Intern, I can check the latch," she said, "just to be sure." The charge nurse hesitated, then waved her off. "Fine. Quickly." She walked away, pace unchanged. At the stairwell door, she pressed lightly against the frame, felt the vibration of movement on the other side. Voices muffled by concrete. She checked the hinge screws, tight. The magnetic lock light glowed green. She stood there for a full 5 seconds. Then she turned and walked back. "It'll hold," she said. No one asked how she knew. The television at the station showed a new image now, Riot police forming a line less than 3 blocks away. The caption had changed, leader injured, location unknown. She watched it for exactly 1 breath, then turned away. Back at the medication cart, she rechecked labels she had already verified. Muscle memory. "Steadying," a man shouted somewhere below. Closer now. The sound carried up the stairwell shaft like smoke. Several patients began calling out, confused, afraid. She moved between rooms, calming without promising anything she could not deliver, adjusting lights, closing doors, creating pockets of quiet. No one noticed the way she positioned herself at the intersection of the 2 longest corridors. No one noticed that from where she stood, she could see the stairwell door, the nurse's station, and the approach from the elevators all at once. To them, she was just an intern waiting for the next task. But the building was shifting, and she was already braced for it. The noise did not arrive all at once. It crept. At first, it was just a low vibration in the walls, something you felt through your feet more than your ears. The building answered it with small sounds of its own, a ceiling panel ticking as it settled, a door rattling briefly in its frame. She stood at the medication cart and felt it before anyone else reacted. Outside, the sirens had changed pitch. Fewer long wails, more short bursts, directional, coordinated. She watched the security officer nears T, the station. His radio crackled again, this time louder. Crowd redirected, unable to hold line. He lowered the volume quickly, glancing around as if the sound itself were dangerous. The charge nurse rubbed her temple. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's keep patients in rooms, no wandering." She nodded and moved without being told. Room 15's patient was pacing, 4-pole rattling. She guided him back to bed with a hand placed lightly on his forearm, firm enough to anchor, gentle enough not to alarm. "Something wrong?" he asked. "Just a busy night," she said. "You're safe here." Safe was a relative term, but the truth mattered less than the steadiness of the voice. In the corridor, a junior security officer leaned against the wall, shifting his weight too often. His eyes flicked toward the stairwell door every few seconds. She passed him and stopped. "You're blocking your own exit," she said calmly. He blinked. "What? If something pushes through," she continued, nodding toward the stairwell, "you'll want space to move laterally. Stand here instead." She indicated a position 2 steps back and to the side. He moved without questioning her. Only afterward did he seem to realize he had taken direction from an intern. She was already gone. At the nurse's station, a phone rang. The charge nurse answered, listened and paled slightly. "Yes," I understand. No, we don't have confirmation yet. Yes, we'll prepare. She hung up slowly. They're diverting emergency intake, she said. Ambulances are being rerouted unless critical. A nurse frowned. Why? Because they expect spillover, the charge nurse replied. No one said the word riot. She took the information in and adjusted. If ambulances were being diverted, it meant law enforcement expected the area to become unstable, which meant containment would be imperfect, which meant people would try doors. She moved to the supply closet and quietly checked inventory. Saline, restraints, gloves. She noted where everything was without touching more than necessary. In the stairwell, the vibration returned. Stronger now. Voices overlapped. Anger carried upward, distorted but unmistakable. A fist struck the door once. Testing. Several staff members jumped. She did not. She watched the lock light. Green, still engaged. The junior doctor approached the charge nurse. Should we call administration? They already know, the charge nurse replied. They're monitoring. Monitoring was not action. She stepped closer. If people breach the lower levels, she said quietly, they'll funnel upward. This ward is on that path. The charge nurse looked at her sharply. What are you suggesting? Nothing yet, she replied. Just awareness. The older nurse beside them scoffed softly. She's an intern. The charge nurse hesitated, then nodded. All right, we'll be alert. It wasn't agreement, but it was permission. The television image shifted again. Live footage now. The camera shook as a reporter ducked behind a police vehicle. A caption flashed briefly before cutting away. Riot leader unaccounted for. That was the missing variable. She moved back to her position at the corridor intersection, pretending to review charts while watching reflections in the glass. She tracked movement by sound and shadow. Security repositioned again, clustering near the station. Wrong instinct. She spoke softly as they passed. If you stand together, you leave blind spots. One officer frowned. We're supposed to stay visible. Visibility doesn't equal coverage, she said. He started to argue, then stopped, spread out instead. The building groaned slightly as something heavy struck the exterior below, not the ward. Yet, a patient cried out somewhere. Another alarm chimed. She responded to both before they escalated. Time stretched. Each minute felt weighted. Then the stairwell door shook harder. Not a test this time. A full-body hit. The magnetic lock held, but only just. Security reached for radios. Voices rose. Confusion bloomed. She stepped forward into the center of the corridor. Hands visible, posture calm. Close patient doors, she said. Lights low. Move carts against the walls. A nurse obeyed instinctively. Then another. The charge nurse watched her, something like realization flickering across her face. Who told you? She began. Another impact cut her off. The lock light flickered. She checked her watch. The distant noise was no longer distant. It was coming for them. The stairwell door did not fail all at once. It gave way in increments. The magnetic lock released with a sharp crack, re-engaged, then cracked again. Each sound echoed down the corridor like a warning shot. Staff froze between instincts, run or hold position, unsure which was worse. She moved, not toward the door, toward the nurse's station. Seal the ward, she said quietly. Now. The charge nurse looked at her, startled. We can't. You can, she replied. You just haven't decided to. Something in her tone cut through the hesitation. Not force, certainty. The charge nurse turned sharply. Close all secondary access point. TEs, she ordered. Security, elevators. Now. This time the security officers moved fast. The stairwell door burst inward on the third hit. Metal bent, hinges screamed. A man stumbled through first, not the leader, just momentum. He caught himself against the wall, eyes wild, shirt smeared with blood that was not all his. Behind him came noise, shouting, anger spilling into the sterile quiet of the ward. Patients began screaming. She positioned herself between the station and the corridor, leading deeper into patient rooms. She did not raise her voice. Lights down, she said to the nearest nurse. Room doors closed. Lock what you can. She met the eyes of the first intruder. He hesitated. Not because she was threatening, because she wasn't. Wrong place, she said evenly. He laughed, short and sharp. We're not here for you. Behind him, the real presence arrived. The riot leader pushed past his own people, one hand clamped to his side, jacket torn. His eyes scanned the ward with fast intelligence, not rage. He took in exits, bodies, spacing. He saw her, not as a nurse, as an obstacle. "We need a room," he said. "Now." Security stepped forward. Too late. She raised one hand, not toward the intruders but toward the officers. "Hold," she said. The word landed heavier than it should have. The riot leader frowned. "Who are you?" She did not answer. She stepped slightly to the side, changing the geometry of the space, forcing him to adjust his approach. Subtle, deliberate. "This is a hospital," she said. "You're bleeding. You don't control what happens here." He smiled thinly. "You think I don't know that?" She glanced at his wound, high on the abdomen, bad angle. He was compensating, hiding pain. "You have minutes before you collapse," she said. "If you push past me, you'll do it in the hallway." The people behind him murmured. Uncertainty crept in. He studied her again, slower this time. "Fine," he said. "Then you help me." She shook her head once. "I help patients." The stairwell behind them echoed with more movement. Pressure building. The ward held its breath. She had not revealed anything. But control had already shifted. The ward compressed around them. Space that had once felt wide and forgiving now felt narrow, measured in steps and angles. The riot leader stood 3 meters from the nurse's station. His people clustered behind him, loud but uncertain, feeding off his posture more than his words. She remained still. Security hovered at the edges, hands near belts, eyes flicking between the intruders and her. No one wanted to be the first to act. The leader shifted his weight and winced before he could hide it. "You're wasting time," he said. "I need treatment." "Now." "You need to lower your voice," she replied. "You're raising heart rate. That makes the bleeding worse." One of his men scoffed. "Who do you think you are?" She ignored him. She stepped closer to the leader, slow enough that no one mistook it for aggression. She stopped just outside arm's reach. "You came here because you knew we wouldn't turn you away," she said. "Don't prove that wrong." He laughed again, but it was thinner now. "And if I don't like your terms?" She looked past him toward the stairwell, where more shadows pressed against the broken door. "Then you'll have a riot inside a hospital," she said, "and you won't survive it. A beat—" He searched her face for ear. Found none. Behind the station, the charge nurse whispered, "Intern." She raised a finger slightly, not silencing, asking for trust. The leader exhaled sharply. "One room, no cops." She nodded once. "Room 21. It's isolated. That's not—" a nurse began. "It is," she said, already moving. "I checked earlier." She gestured, and the path opened, not because she ordered it, because no one thought to stop her. As they moved, she controlled the pace, slow enough to keep him upright, fast enough to prevent debate. She positioned him on her left, injured side, away from walls, away from hands. At room 21, she stopped. "Only you," she said to his group. "One escort. Everyone else stays back." They bristled. He considered, then waved them off. "Do it." Inside the room, the door closed softly behind them. The ward exhaled, but not fully. She snapped on gloves. "Clean." "Precise. You sit," she said. He did. As she assessed the wound, her movements were efficient, practiced beyond routine training, pressure applied exactly where needed, no wasted motion. "You've done this before," he muttered. "Yes," she replied. Outside, security shifted, uneasy. Inside, the balance of power had quietly, decisively changed. The room was small, one bed, one monitor, one narrow window looking out onto a brick wall that reflected no light. It was designed for overflow, not crisis, temporary, easy to isolate. She had chosen it for that reason. She closed the door fully and slid the privacy curtain halfway, not for modesty, but to narrow the leader's field of vision. People who felt watched made mistakes. "Lift your shirt," she said. He did, slowly. The wound was worse than he had let on. A deep laceration, possibly from broken glass or shrapnel. Bleeding had slowed, but not stopped. He was holding himself together by will. "You need stitches," she said. "And rest." "I need 10 minutes," he replied. "Then I leave." She did not argue. She cleaned the wound with steady hands, ignoring the tension humming in the air. Her focus never drifted. Pain response, breathing pattern, micro-tremors in his fingers. "You're in shock," she said. "No," he replied. "Not yet." Outside the room she could hear raised voices. Security radios. Someone arguing about calling federal backup. The escort paced near the door, nervous, too close to the handle. She noticed. "Sit down," she said without looking up. He hesitated. The leader glanced at him. "Sit." The man obeyed. She worked in silence for a moment, then spoke again. "When you came in," she said, "you weren't running from police." He stiffened slightly. "You were running from your own people," she continued. "You lost control out there." He said nothing. "That makes you dangerous," she added. "Not to us. To yourself." He studied her now with open suspicion. "You talk like you know me." She met his eyes briefly. "I talk like I've seen this before." She finished the temporary closure and secured the dressing. Firm, clean. Outside, footsteps stopped abruptly near the door. "Someone listening." She straightened and removed her gloves. "You will stay here," she said to him. 5 minutes, then security will escort you out the service corridor. "Alone." He laughed softly. "You think they'll listen to you?" She looked toward the door. "They already are." As if on cue, the noise outside lowered. Voices dropped. Movement slowed. The Scort frowned. "What did you do?" She did not answer. She checked her watch. 3 minutes, she said. For the first time since he arrived, the riot leader looked uncertain, and uncertainty in a man like him was the beginning of the end. The quiet outside the room was unnatural. Hospitals were never truly silent, but this was different. The usual background hum had thinned, as if the building itself were holding back breath. She noticed it immediately. She opened the door just enough to look out. The corridor had changed. Security officers were no longer clustered. They were spaced, covering angles. One had positioned himself near the stairwell, another near the elevators. The charge nurse stood at the station, phone pressed to her ear, nodding slowly, listening more than speaking. Someone higher up was now on the line. She stepped fully into the corridor. The charge nurse looked up. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition mixed with relief and unease. "They're asking who's coordinating," the charge nurse said quietly. She did not answer right away. Instead, she looked down the hall toward the broken stairwell door. The shadows there were thicker now. The crowd had not pushed through, but they had not left either. Containment without resolution. "That door will not hold if they surge together," she said. "They're waiting for a signal." The charge nurse swallowed. "What signal?" She glanced back toward room 21. Him. As if summoned by the attention, the riot leader appeared in the doorway behind her, pale but upright, his escort hovering close. The presence of him shifted the air again. Conversation stalled. Radios went quiet. "A sec." Unity officer stepped forward instinctively. She raised a hand. "Not yet," she said. The officer froze. The charge nurse stared at her now, openly. "You can't—" "I can," she replied. "And I am." She turned to the leader. "You leave through the service corridor. Now." He opened his mouth to argue. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "If you walk back into that stairwell," she said, "they will tear this place apart for you. If you leave quietly, they lose momentum. You disappear. So does the threat." His jaw tightened. "And if I don't trust you?" "You already did," she replied. "You sat down when I told you to." A long beat passed. He nodded once. "All right," he said. "But they follow me." "No," she said. "They don't." She turned to security. "Clear the service corridor. No uniforms visible from the stairwell. Now." One officer hesitated. "We need authorization." She reached into her scrub pocket and produced a slim, worn credential. Not flashed, not dramatic, just held low, angled toward him. His eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am," he said immediately. The charge nurse went still. She slipped the credential back into her pocket before anyone else could fully register it. "Move," she said. They did. As the corridor cleared, the leader looked at her one last time. "You didn't have to do this," he said. She met his gaze, calm and unyielding. "Yes," she replied. "I did." She watched him disappear down the service hall, swallowed by shadow and distance. The stairwell noise faded, not all at once, but enough. The crisis was breaking. The cost, however, was not over. The ward did not return to normal. It settled into something else. A fragile stillness replaced. The tension, thin as glass. People moved carefully, as if sudden motion might shatter what had been achieved. She stood near the nurse's station, hands folded loosely in front of her, watching the service corridor door until it closed and locked again. Only then did she allow herself to breathe fully. The charge nurse approached her slowly. "What was that?" she asked, not accusatory, exhausted. "A solution," she replied. "That credential," the charge nurse said. "I didn't—" You weren't supposed to, she said gently. A security supervisor arrived from the elevators, flanked by 2 officers. His uniform was immaculate. His face was not. I was told someone issued orders without clearance, he said. She turned to face him. I issued orders to prevent a mass casualty event. He looked ready to argue. Then he looked at the ward, the closed doors, the quiet patients, the intact glass. You're an intern, he said carefully. Yes, and yet. She met his eyes. You can write me up if you need to. He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head once. No, he said. I'll write that, the situation resolved before command intervention. That was as close to gratitude as he would allow. He walked away. The charge nurse exhaled shakily. They'll ask questions. Yes, she said. And answers? She looked down at her hands. There was dried blood under one fingernail she had missed. Some, she said. Not all. She returned to her rounds without ceremony. Checked vitals, adjusted drips, reassured patients who would never know how close the night had come to breaking open. In room 21, the bed was empty now, sheets neatly folded. No sign the riot leader had ever been there. That absence weighed on her. Near dawn, she stepped into the staff restroom and locked the door, leaned against the sink, closed her eyes for 10 seconds. The cost arrived then, not as fear but as fatigue, deep, bone level. She washed her hands carefully. Once, twice, when she returned to the ward, the sun was beginning to thin the darkness outside the windows. The crisis was over. The consequences were not. Morning did not announce itself. It seeped in through the high windows, dull and grey, touching the linoleum with a colourless light that made everything look honest. The ward smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Night staff moved with the stiff grace of people who had spent too long holding themselves together. She finished her last round without ceremony, room by room, monitor by monitor, nothing urgent, no alarms. The building had survived the night, and now it wanted to forget it. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse sat with a clipboard, red eyes focused on paperwork she had already reviewed twice. She looked up as she approached. They're transferring you, she said quietly. She did not react. Where? Different hospital. Different rotation. A pause. Effective immediately. She nodded once. Understood. No protest, no questions. A man in a plain jacket waited near the elevators. Not law enforcement, not hospital administration. His posture gave him away more than his face. He met her there. You contained it, he said. Not praise. Statement, yes, she replied. They'll report it as crowd dispersal, he continued. No individual credit. She adjusted the strap of her bag. That's fine. He studied her for a moment. You crossed lines. She met his Z. So did they. Another pause. You're done here, he said. Go home. She stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of the ward. Nurses moving on. Patients waking. A normal morning, earned quietly. Outside, the city was calmer. Debris had been cleared. Police lines thinned. Life resumed its familiar shape. She walked away without looking back. No one followed. No one stopped her. By evening, her badge would be deactivated. Her name would be absent from reports. The night would become a paragraph, then a footnote, then nothing at all. She preferred it that way. The hospital stood. The ward was secure. The crisis ended without spectacle. And somewhere, someone would always believe she had just been an intern nurse who happened to be on shift. They would be wrong. By mid-morning, the hospital was back under control. Not officially, not publicly, but functionally. Maintenance crews replaced the bent stairwell door without asking questions. Security reports were filed with neutral language. Disturbance, temporary breach, resolved without injury. Administration arrived late, once the danger had already passed, and spoke in measured tones about protocols and reviews. She was not invited into those conversations. She sat in an empty break room with a paper cup of coffee she did not drink, waiting because she had been told to wait. Her scrubs were clean now, her hands steady again. Only the fatigue lingered. A man from Federal Oversight arrived shortly after noon. Plain clothes, no visible badge. He did not introduce himself beyond a last name. You prevented escalation, he said. You also exceeded your assigned authority. Yes, she replied. He studied her file on a tablet, not the hospital file. The other one. This facility wasn't briefed, he continued. That was intentional. I understand. He looked up. Due. She met his eyes. They needed to believe I was just staff. A pause. The ward is secure, he said. The individual you treated is in custody elsewhere. No casualties inside the hospital. She nodded once. You'll be reassigned, he added. No commendation, no record of involvement. That's acceptable, she said. He closed the tablet. You're clear to leave. No handshake. No thanks. When she walked back through the ward one last time, no one stopped her. Nurses were busy, doctors focused on charts, patients slept or watched morning television. The place had already moved on. Only the charge nurse looked up as she passed. Take care, she said quietly. You too, she replied. That was all. She exited through a side door most people never used. Outside, the city looked ordinary again. Traffic flowed, storefronts were open. The previous night had already begun to dissolve into rumor and memory. She walked several blocks before stopping. From that distance, the hospital looked the same as it always had. White concrete, glass. Nothing remarkable. No sign of what it had nearly become. Her phone vibrated once. A single message. No sender name. No explanation. Rotation complete. Stand down. She deleted it without replying. By the time the evening shift arrived, her badge no longer worked. Her name would be removed from the schedule. New interns would take her place, unaware of the narrow margin that had held. The ward would remain secure. The incident would fade. Officially, control had never been lost. And to anyone who asked later, she would have been remembered, if at all, as a quiet nurse who worked a night shift and transferred out without fuss. That was enough. The crisis had ended without spectacle. Authority had been exercised without announcement, and she disappeared back into the quiet, exactly where she belonged.